The remainder of June carried the momentum from the previous weeks. Many of the high-profile matches from around the world delivered, while the mainstream promotions in America took a step back. Once again, there's plenty to get into, so it's best to not waste any more time. Before we do, a reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 134 matches spanning 18 promotions, here are a few of my favorites from the back half of June. Almost a year after their first singles match, Kaito, Kiyomiya, and Gabe Kidd have their rematch, in a much different environment with much higher stakes. After weeks of belt thieving and bloodshed, Gabe Kidd enters a Pro Wrestling Noah ring in an attempt to usurp the GHC and essentially hold the promotion hostage. This puts Kaito in a difficult position for his first defense of his current reign, but it was a necessary test to fully realize this version of himself. I do think that they got to where they wanted to as far as the objective of this match, but unfortunately it wasn't entirely what I wanted it to be. Granted, I did quite like a lot of this, and Kaito and Gabe still have great chemistry. To me, it felt like they dropped these two into an obligatory big match structure, and by doing so, doesn't blow off this feud in the same way it's been carried in prior meetings. This could all come down to my own expectations and how much I enjoyed this feud, and to their credit, there is a through line of violence present here, though it does tend to clash with that modern main event formula. The chaotic spurts and huge bumps still hit, though I feel the moments in between kill a lot of the momentum generated rather than balancing things out. I understand that they can't go 27 minutes at the pace that they've set before, but you don't really need 27 minutes to get your point across here. Despite where it does fall short for me, I still think it's a good match, and it's in the video for a reason. The better aspects of this feud make it stand out from the other GHC heavyweight title bouts this year. I can't remember the last time one of these matches featured both wrestlers running the blade, and that provided some insane imagery that will stick with me for a while. Specifically, the shot of a bloodied Gabe Kidd holding Kaito in a hanging sleeper atop the turnbuckle. That blade job would sustain through the end of the match, as you can actually catch Gabe's blood starting to clot as he raises his head from the canvas in defeat. I mentioned the objective of this match, and that brings us back to the champion. It feels like Noah really wanted to get it right with Kaito this time around, and this first defense against this violent, unpredictable Gaijin sets the stage for a match where neither man will leave it the same that they entered. To me, that's the greatest success of this thing. I did feel a palpable change in Kaito by the time he pins Gabe. This type of exhausting war endured shows us that he's grown to take on all comers for his mantle, and Gabe Kidd, all shtick aside, was a great foil to emphasize this. It's a vindictive win for Galaxy View, and a much needed one at that. In the end, it's a match that still makes me think after multiple views, which is always worth of note. Despite my issues with the pacing, you can do a lot worse than this brawling, bloodshed, and a tiger suplex from the second rope. It might just not live up to the more heated encounters in a much more intimate venue. Deadlock was back with another live show, headlined by the next World's Championship defense for Calvin Tankman. This time, it was Alex Shelley who tries his hand at unseating Heavyweight Hustle. This match is another instance of how well DPW and Calvin Tankman have done with this title reign. It plays to Tankman's strengths, though the dynamic between him and Shelley is far different than previous challengers. Shelley is great here as the wily veteran, not only entering with a strategy, but implements some good old-fashioned shock and awe tactics by spitting water in Tankman's face right at the opening bell. Naturally, this doesn't sit well with the champion, and sets the tone for what is by all accounts a very pissed off match. There's a heated energy throughout that's aided by all the hard strikes and trash talking between the two. This opening from Shelley is able to goad Tankman into swinging recklessly, which allows him to go after the left arm. Shelley's precise, snappy offense when in control is great, and this early advantage shows that his years of experience can get him around a major size disadvantage. With the physical capabilities that Tankman possesses, you'd assume after a while he'd find a way to push back, and surely enough, he gets the best out of an exchange in the corner, where he hurts Shelley's lower back. Caprice Coleman once again does great work on commentary, pointing out that Shelley is struggling with his sciatic nerve from this point. Knowing Shelley's background as a physical therapist, this sounds like it'd be something he would come up with, and I think it's a cool spin on selling nerve damage. Both men having a part of their arsenal compromised plays at the risk factor as the match heads into deep waters. Shelley gets these glimpses of hope by pulling off insane feats of strength, but further aggravates the back in the process. Tankman also can't rely on his strength entirely in his own right, though the thing with these title defenses is that it feels like he's just one shot away from turning the whole thing on its head. A nice bit of ring awareness from the champion catches Shelley defenseless, and that thunderous right hand from Tankman initiates the finishing sequence. He wins with the Tankman driver, but the path to get there wasn't a crystal clear one. For an 8th successful defense, it's very important to keep things fresh, and Tankman and DPW have done a great job in that regard. I found a lot to enjoy here between the ideas at play and these two just smacking the hell out of each other for 15 minutes. Another great entry in what is becoming a standout title reign in 2024. Josh Barnett took his Bloodsport series overseas to Ryogoku, headlined by the man himself in a rematch against Jon Moxley. 3 years ago, Barnett defeated Moxley in 11 minutes, and it remained to be seen how the current IWGP World Heavyweight Champion would fare against the War Master a second time around. The appeal here is pretty straightforward. Two badasses taking part in a shoot-adjacent match, though the story it tells is very much rooted in traditional pro wrestling ideals. From the off, Jon Moxley is outclassed by Barnett. When Barnett decides to leave the mat to hit a powerbomb, Mox is shell-shocked. He tries to spring up out of instinct but doesn't have his bearings and has no choice but to retreat. It's a damn thing to witness the purveyor of violence resorting to evasive tactics, but he simply has no choice. Barnett stays on his opponent using the environment to his advantage, be it slams on the floor or back into the ring due to the absence of the ropes. The desperation from Moxley is on display as he's hanging on for dear life to the rungs that would hold the turnbuckles and tearing at Barnett's ear. We've gotten a glimpse of a more vulnerable side of Moxley this year when he had a slew of matches based around a previous arm injury. But here it's just a matter of Barnett dominating from the get-go, testing his mettle to go to those places to survive and overcome. Granted, it's coming from someone who's defeated him in the past, but it's refreshing all the same. Another thing I liked throughout this match was the looming threat of Barnett's powerbomb. There was a knockout finish that used the move earlier in the show, which established that it could very well do the same here. Moxley being able to withstand multiple felt very significant because of that. From the ear gouging, you get probably the most wild spot in the match, the giant swing into the ring post. And while I get some of the criticism towards where the contact actually happened compared to where Mox was bleeding, I can easily see past it. The spot ruled, and the blade job was one of the best all year, and they did not let it go to waste. Barnett takes little time to begin working the wound, and in turn, his wrist tape is soaked, as both his limbs as well as Moxley's are stained in crimson. When Moxley is able to emerge with a double wrist lock, in this state, it feels massive. And the crime scene visuals certainly help amplify it for me. Here the pro wrestling sensibilities really start to take over, as Mox sells the blood loss mid-hold, though Barnett isn't able to capitalize on one more powerbomb as the clock hits the time limit. This stoppage is Moxley's lifeline. He's hung in there long enough to get the forced break, and gets just enough time to come back to life. The restart is short, explosive, and just kicks so much ass. There's been a few matches I've discussed this year that follow the theme of enduring and making your one shot count, but none of them have felt this visceral. A tiger driver and a double stomp, in a shoot style environment mind you, give Moxley the opening to go in for the kill, winning via referee stoppage. I love this match. It was a gritty, brutal, messy war that lives up to the event's name and reputation. To borrow from the post-match promo, what you saw tonight was pro wrestling. The greatest damn sport in the whole world, pro wrestling. Across the Pacific, a pair of world-class technicians met in a singles match for the first time in 6 years, and given the form that these two have been in recent months, it seems like the timing couldn't have been better. With Hechicero coming off of a huge victory over the legendary Blue Panther, and Zack Sabre Jr. putting together one of the more impressive individual months of the entire year, the stars aligned for this match to occur while both are firing on all cylinders. Off the bat, you can tell something special is in the air, and the venue certainly lends to that. The way Arena Coliseo is built, the fans are right on top of the action and are incredibly receptive to every hold. This gives Zack some nice avenues for character work, like some heel shtick to play off of the crowd or taking a quick beer break between skirmishes. The action itself is as advertised. The grappling in the first fall is done at breakneck pace, though never feels too flashy or cooperative. Even at this speed, you could still catch them making the on-the-fly adjustments the entire time. There's always a hand or leg repositioned into the next counter, and it's mesmerizing to watch. This probably sounds like a very obvious thing to point out, but I think the 2 out of 3 falls structure greatly benefits this style. Not only do you get less near falls, but seeing these two specialists submit each other multiple times makes them feel a whole lot more dangerous. Fall number 2, while brief, takes a nastier turn as Zack goes after the arm in brutal fashion. He oversteps his bounds when trying to implement strikes, allowing Hechicero to storm back and tie up all of his limbs at once to even the score. With a submission under each of their belts, the last fall is actually based around pinning attempts. Neither man can seem to figure out how to put the other away, and by this point, they're willing to take greater risks to do so. Hechicero is the first to actually leave the ground by hitting a springboard dive, though this doesn't pay off as Zack is able to catch him in an armbar. This was a clear indication that it has to finish on the mat, and the two look for that answer in the final stretch. It's Hechicero who was just able to scrape the victory with a jackknife pin and a little help from the bottom rope, not all too different from his pinfall over Blue Panther in their tag match a few weeks ago. I thought this was fantastic, not only for how well these two meshed together, but each fall had its own identity while still feeling consistent. The format also breaks up the action to really make the 20 minutes fly by, and the atmosphere greatly complements everything. If you haven't seen it by now, you're doing yourself a disservice. Shortly after this, Zack would have another awesome match in Mexico against Virus, as well as the Orange Cassidy match that I liked a whole lot as well. Pretty decent output if you'd ask me. On the heels of his first title defense against Kento Miyahara, Yuma Anzai's next challenger comes in the form of a polar opposite. Hideki Suzuki stakes his claim after dealing with Yuma with relative ease in the Champions Carnival, through targeting Yuma's heavily taped knee. Now it's a matter of Yuma proving that his run throughout the spring was not a fluke. First of all, you know it's about to go down when Hideki breaks out the Adidas jacket. He is here to punish the young champion, and with Anzai's amateur background, immediately looks to test him on the mat. I mentioned Hideki being a polar opposite to Kento, and he makes that clear as soon as the bell rings. There's no standoff or posturing to the crowd. He's in Anzai's face immediately, and lets us know that he intends on this being a Hideki Suzuki style match. Anzai doesn't falter, and is game to go hold for hold. I think they did a good job of making him feel credible in this area, as he's actively looking to counter rather than wrestling defensively. It's a push-back mentality that doesn't sit well with his senior. There's one particular exchange that is very important in the context of Anzai's maturity. After securing a rope break, Suzuki takes a pot shot and just slaps Yuma in the face in an attempt to get under his skin. In response, Yuma simply plants his feet in the center of the ring and refuses. A lesser wrestler would fly into the corner out of rage, and Suzuki could easily end it right there. Like I said, the mentality here is to push back through the wrestling, and he sticks to that plan as long as he could. Anzai continues to get the better of these exchanges, and Suzuki throws a gut punch out of desperation. It's a nice moment of confidence for Anzai, though the longer this continues, the more annoyed Suzuki gets, and that's reflected in his offense. As things progress, this gets more strike heavy, and Suzuki's feels so mean and indignant. The first punch felt like a necessity, though the ensuing flurry is out of pure frustration. This beat in particular acts as a nice bridge from the mat-based opening to the bombastic finishing stretch. The escalation feels organic, thanks in part to Suzuki's demeanor. He's incredibly giving both physically and through his character. This sets the stage for Anzai's late match heroics, which Hideki makes him work for all of it. The cutoffs are great, and when Anzai successfully executes a gimlet to seal the win, it feels like a genuine accomplishment. I really enjoyed this match, as well as the concept of dropping Yuma into these very distinct main event matches to make his own impression. Obviously, who he's been assigned in these matches helps, though Yuma still feels like he contributes quite a bit to them. I've yet to see the remainder of his run, but this match especially is convincing me that he's absolutely the real deal. On the latest iteration of Kenta Kobashi's produce show, Meiko Satomura made her return to the ring after a 15-month absence. She teams with Takumi Iroha to take on Team 200 kg amidst their stellar 2024. Like many, I was primarily looking forward to the Hash and Meiko interactions, but everyone showed out in this match. Yu and Iroha made the most out of their minutes by prioritizing physicality. It is the Sendai Girls pairing that anchors the match though. Meiko not only founded the promotion, but also trained Hashimoto. That sentiment was always going to be there, and to little surprise, the wrestling lives up to that. I think they do a great job of proving that Meiko can still very much go, and also showcases all of Hashimoto's talents. They start on the mat and gradually escalate into more violent tendencies, with Meiko out-wrestling her pupil before Hash starts throwing short-arm lariats. My main takeaway from this specific stretch is just how much Meiko stands out. Something as simple as the way she throws her kicks just feels different compared to everyone else. On top of that, the sequence shows she's still as mean as they come. She's able to take Hash out of the equation during the match's final chaotic sprint, as Iroha gets the fall on Yu for the victory. While I don't have a ton more to say about it, I think it's a very simple match that just makes the most out of the individual exchanges, and is just an easy watch in general. I was happy just to see Meiko return in the first place, though she wasn't going to step between the ropes without reminding everyone how special she truly is. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions that weren't brought up in previous entries. MJF vs. Rush from AEW June 19th. Rush puts in a Herculean effort, giving us a match free of a lot of the pitfalls that current MJF seems to force into his matches. It's probably one of the most impressive individual performances of the year up to this point. Go Shiozaki's anniversary match, also from June 19th in Noah. Go is one of my favorite wrestlers, so this was always going to appeal to me, but I think Noah has a pretty good track record with these celebration matches in general. Takuya Nomura's slate of matches. A lot of good stuff between the astronauts Haramau tag from Basara, a violent sprint against Eric Hammer at Bloodsport, and a very solid singles match against Dan Tamura in Evolution. I was happy to see Nomura pop up on the watch list as often as he did, as I simply haven't watched a ton of him this year in comparison to his tag team partner. The CMLL New Japan Fantastica Mania in Arena Mexico from June 21st. A real easy watch, highlighted by Stephanie Vaquer's title defense against La Catalina, a fun Dorada and Templario tag, and depending on where you're at with Hiromu in 2024, you might like the main event too. And speaking of Stephanie Vaquer, I really liked the Mercedes match from Forbidden Door. It's a shame the crowd only came alive despite Boston sports teams, rather than because of what was happening in the ring. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and you can find me on Twitter at OuterStevan. There won't be any mid-year special from me this time around, as we're closing in on September by the time this goes up, so it's best I return to catching up as efficiently as I possibly can. I'll talk to you again next time as we begin diving into July.